Screaming warrants, cannons and gunfire lit up the dead of the night on September 6th, 1965, as India attacked Pakistan. The Indian army that planned to take Lahore within 24 hours was shell-shocked by Pakistan's military that not just thwarted their attack, but pushed them deep into the Indian territory. New Delhi's jingoistic obsessions have only grown over time, fueled by its expansionist aspirations. India is currently also at odds with China and Nepal, as well, over its failed attempts to annex territories. Pakistan's civil and military top brass repeatedly expressed willingness to rise above past differences for a better future for the two countries and the region. But now, with an ultra-right-wing RSS government in New Delhi, India's aggressive designs are getting worse. With the illegal annexation of Kashmir, genocide of Kashmiri Muslims fast-tracked under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, another conflict between the two nuclear neighbors might prove calamitous for the world. In today's quest, we set out to seek what are reasons behind this volatility in the region and why sustainable peace between India and Pakistan so elusive.
Another working week gets underway. You're watching Quest with me, Addiel Sabir. Welcome to the show. 6th of September 1965, a day which is not only important in history for India and Pakistan, but also for the region. Of course, India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars, 2 over Kashmir. However, September 6, 1965, Pakistan marks this particular day because of the aggression which was shown by the Indians, having crossed over into Pakistan territory and then thwarted by the Pakistan Defence Forces. And of course, in doing so, many lives were lost, not only on Pakistan's side, but also on India's side. Many decades have passed, but still, peace seems to be elusive for this particular region between India and Pakistan. And of course, recently, with developments in Afghanistan, where India has had a stake in the past, and Pakistan clearly does, being one of the main sort of interlocutors between the Afghan Taliban and the US, which withdrew last week, has left the world in a bit of a spin. None more so than Pakistan and India, who now are jockeying for position in the region. Today, we're going to be examining some of the elements of why peace is elusive between these two neighbours, and the fact that they're neighbours, and how much of a possibility is there that there ever be a full-scale war between both these conjoined twins, as they say. To help us shed light on this discussion, we're joined by General Retired Naeem Khalid Lodi. He is a defence analyst. We're joined by Moya Jafri, a political analyst from Lahore. And we're joined by Isa Naqvi, joins us from Islamabad. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the programme. Just like to begin. Back in March of this year, Pakistan had held a security dialogue with many participants from across the globe, including Pakistan and Pakistan's civil and military leadership, where once again, Prime Minister Imran Khan has put his best foot forward by saying and reaching out to the Indians with an olive branch to say that, OK, if we must move forward, we must see eye to eye and we must resolve the Kashmir issue first, but the first step must come from the Indian side. And in perhaps breaking with the norms of what we normally see in Pakistan, Pakistan's army chief, who very seldom speaks on these occasions, has also once again reiterated and extended an olive branch to India. So let's just have a listen to the first Prime Minister and then Pakistan's army chief on what their position is and what they think of India and how peace can be achieved in this region.
जब मेरी गवर्नमेंट आई तो हमने पूरी कोशिश की हिंदुस्तान से कि हम अपने जो भी इश्यूज हैं, और हमारा इशू बेसिकली कश्मीरी एक ही इशू है, हम उसको कैसे डायलॉग के जरिए हल करें और अपनी एक सिविलाइज्ड नेबर्स की तरह अपनी रिलेशनशिप कायम करें। अनफॉर्चुनेटली 5 अगस्त आ गया और उससे बहुत बड़ा एक धचका पड़ा और हमारे टोटल ब्रेक डाउन हो गया दोनों मुल्कों के बीच में। अभी भी उम्मीद हम ये रखते हैं कि अगर वो कश्मीरियों को जो उनका राइट है, जो यूनाइटेड नेशंस की सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल ने उनको राइट दिया है कि अपनी ज़िंदगी का फ़ैसला ख़ुद करें, अगर वो राइट देते हैं तो ये हिंदुस्तान के लिए भी उतना फ़ायदेमंद है जितना हम पाकिस्तान के लिए, कि अगर ये वो उस तरफ पीस की तरफ डायलॉग के ज़रिए अगर कश्मीर का रेजोल्यूशन की तरफ जाता है तो ये सारा इलाका चेंज हो जाता है.
Kashmir dispute is obviously at the heart of this problem. It is important to understand that without the resolution of Kashmir dispute through peaceful means, process of subcontinental rapprochement will always remain susceptible to derailment due to politically motivated bellicosity. However, we feel that it is time to bury the past and move forward. But for resumption of peaceful process or meaningful dialogue, our neighbor will have to create conducive environment, particularly in Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Welcome back. Now, as I said in my intro, 6th September 1965 marks a very important day in history for both India and for Pakistan, particularly for Pakistan, of course, whose armed forces had put such a valiant effort up to thwart the Indian aggression. The Indians had thought they'd come as far as Lahore within a few days, but Pakistan armed forces time and time again pushed them back into their own territory. In many ways, it's historical in many ways, significant in many ways, but time has moved on. But just to get a brief overview of what happened that day, let's just turn now to General Lodi, who joins us. General Lodi, just a quick overview of what transpired back then in 1965. Just put it into context. I know not a full history lesson as such, but just the significance of what went down that day.
Thank you very much. You see, it was always Pakistan's stance, and I think we are quite consistent on that, that it is always better to negotiate, to talk, rather than to fight. But, you know, people, many of our friends, they think 1965 war was started by Pakistan, and at times they also say that it was a stalemate and nobody won. Let me put the history straight. One, that just prior to this 65 war, there was an operation in Run of Kutch, where aggression was made by Indians. They came in the territory, Pakistani territory, and actually occupied Pakistani territory, Run of Kutch. And there was a lot of fighting. They were pushed back. Then, of course, some other countries they jumped in, and some ceasefire was you can say evolved. Then we must remember that the Kashmir, this ceasefire line was a ceasefire line then, and there were small skirmishes all along, and both sides were at times crossing that line. And yes, we did start Operation Gibraltar, which was just to sense or give a fillip to some of the Kashmiri movement which was going on there. But that was a small thing which happened. Indian Army, they proper attacked Azad Kashmir. And as they attacked, then in our defense, we had to go within Kashmir. The Operation Grand Slam took place, and we were going for, places close to Akhnur, Cham Jodiya. And that is when the Indians realized that the things are getting out of hand. Now, till this time, it was okay, because ceasefire line was not an international border, and there was no war going on. Small skirmishes and small operations, that was all. And remember that it was started in Run of Kutch by Indians. So first, this pretext is wrong that the war was started by Pakistan. Secondly, now actual war, according to any definition, takes place once you cross the international border. And that is what Indians did on the night between 5th and 6th of September. And so that was their aggression. And very clearly their aims were two. One, to capture Lahore. Secondly, after capturing Sialkot, to go beyond up to Wazirabad and cut off the railway line and the GT road. So this was their aim. And you must have heard, because you are much younger, you may not be knowing the thing, that BBC had already said that Indian Army has captured Lahore. So, whereas actually what happened was that they were stopped right at BRB, which is quite close to the border. Even in Sialkot, they came up to Chwenda and certain places, but again, they were stopped there. So they could not succeed in their objectives. And not only that, this is just what happened on ground. After 3-4 days, I mean from 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, from 11th September onward, the Indian Air Force was totally beaten within these 4 or 5 days. And there was complete air superiority of PF, Pakistan Air Force, and Indian aircraft were not even flying. They dare not fly. They were not coming. And what happened in the Navy? We had one, submarine, and they had taken all their ships and tucked them somewhere wherever they could hide. Our ships went 250 nautical miles and bombarded Dwarka and pulverized it, and then came back. So there was no naval action after that once. So we had naval superiority, we had air superiority, and we had defended ourselves valiantly on ground, and we had not allowed them to do whatever they wanted to do. So what else is victory? I don't know why some of our people, they keep asking such questions, whether it was a stalemate or it was a victory and who started it. So I put the entire thing in context just to know that your viewers should be, well educated what actually happened.
That's very nicely summarised there, General Lodi. Moving on, of course, come 71, of course, Pakistan and India were at war again. And I just want to sort of like shuffle forward a little bit to modern times. Let's bring in Isa Naqvi, who also keeps a very close eye on Pakistan's Foreign Office and how Pakistan conducts its foreign affairs, particularly vis-a-vis India. Isa, how would you describe the last sort of perhaps 2 decades, the relationship? Of course, it took another turn come the Mumbai attacks. And then consequently, we've seen various incidents take place on both sides. India, of course, blaming the Pulwama attack on Pakistan. And there was an incursion by the Indian Air Force, obviously, which Pakistan again thwarted most recently, where they downed an Indian pilot and then returned the Indian pilot. Then we hear about, obviously, the spy, Gulbishan Yadav, who was caught in Pakistani territory, who has confessed and who India so desperately wants consular access to. So your take, Isa, on how the relationship has been between India and Pakistan, let's say over the last 2 decades?
Adil, well, it has always been a roller coaster ride between India and Pakistan. But most recently, what we have seen that India's foreign policy, especially vis-a-vis Pakistan, is being driven through its hegemonic designs in the region and the way India wants to treat its neighbors. And the jingoistic statements, then there is an internal domestic pressure that they have created, which actually drives their relationship. There is no real rationale behind it. But if we talk about the last 6 months, we have seen a relatively calm on especially the line of control. And now there is enough evidence to prove that it was Pakistan that actually led or initiated that after India requested for it. We see a calm on the line of control. But the fact remains, and the history shows between India and Pakistan, that a small incident can undo all the steps taken in the positive direction. So potentially India and Pakistan, when it comes to their relationship, Kashmir remains the flashpoint between the two. And unless this issue is resolved, I do not see things going forward, because any small incident can undo whatever is achieved through diplomacy or political efforts or through intervention of the international community. Pakistan and India both are prisoners of this mistake which was made in the history when the two countries or the Indian subcontinent was divided, and after the partition we saw Pakistan and India came into being.
Moya Jafri, coming to you. Isa just touched on a point that, of course, in many ways, Kashmir remains the focal part of all of this. But in many ways, I just want to talk about the internal dynamics of Indian politics. We've seen recently that, of course, there have been many separatist movements over the years in India, many disgruntled folk over in India. So would you agree with the notion that perhaps giving up the Kashmir issue may result in perhaps India having to give up other states, perhaps? And that's why they are so hell-bent on keeping a stranglehold on Kashmir, a stranglehold which began 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to the day, perhaps, in August in 2019, when they denied the semi-autonomous rights of the Kashmiris and, in fact, effectively put the whole region into lockdown, which still continues to this day. So give us a little bit of an insight, perhaps, regarding these separatist outfits which have been present in India.
Very rightly pointed out, Adil. It's basically what, over time, what Kashmir has become even more so critical for India is because of this very fact. We've seen in the past, and even right now, there are many movements inside India, especially in the part that they call the Maoists. Those are also being discriminated against, and there is a long history of that. So that separatist and secessionist movements underway, the Naxalites, once again. Then the entire problem when the bigger, larger state of Assam was divided into 7 sisterly states, they had their own territorial demarcation issues, which the Indian government has failed to resolve over decades now. And those have now again started, surfacing. So they're facing a challenge there as well. Plus, down south towards the port areas, there the islands that India controls. Those two are now basically calling for better freedom rights, because Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he's brought this very stark right-wing, exclusionary, Hindu centralized narrative to India, which was already very much hostile toward its neighbors. And what basically Narendra Modi's divisive politics did was that it heated up that environment of hatred inside India. And we've seen over the past years how the Citizen National Register, how the CAA Act, under which he was basically saying that no Muslims in certain states belonged in India, and they should all be, the citizenship should be revoked, and they should all be sent outside of Pakistan or outside of India into Bangladesh or even in Pakistan. So all these factors that are playing inside India have mounted more and more pressure on the Indian government, especially Narendra Modi's BJP right-wing government, because at this point of time, if they show any leniency, if they show any sort of regard for international law, which requires them to deal with Kashmir in a completely different manner, the way they've been doing so in the past with hundreds and thousands of Indian forces in Kashmir. As you pointed out rightly, there's been a lockdown. They keep on trying to convince the world that it's not there. But the fact remains, the international media has been reporting about it, how they've turned the entire Kashmir into an open prison. So yes, I completely agree with you. And there is a tangible, it's not just a theory. These are based on facts. Indian media talks about it. International media talks about it. Their own scholarships, politicians have pointed out. So if at this point of time, India does not act the way it is acting in Kashmir, that is annexing it, revoking its internationally recognized disputed status, if it lets go of that, then it'll be a slippery slope for the Indian government, where they'll have to give the same rights to other states. And this entire Akhand Bharat narrative, which is forcibly joining all these states together, whether they want to or not, it'll fall flat on its face. So they are in kind of a fix how to deal with it. And their only way to do it the way they think is to show power, show authority, and iron fist clamp down on Kashmir, which sends the message to other states and other secessionist and separatist movements inside India.
Indeed. Now that's the internal dynamics that you've just heard from Moyed Jafri. General Lodhi, bringing you to another element of India's problems, if you may, is how it's being in dispute with, for example, the likes of China and with the likes of Nepal. If we look at the context of the region, I mean, Pakistan has relatively good relationships with most of the region at large, bar India, and it seems as though India, unfortunately, though it set out to isolate Pakistan politically within the international forum, doesn't seem to be faring too well, given the disputes it's facing with China and with the likes of Nepal. Your take?
True. It is not only China. If it was China and Pakistan, one would think that, okay, there are some historical baggages of these countries. And look at their relations with Sri Lanka, with Nepal, even with Bangladesh. They have an attitude of a bully, and they think that I mean it's good. We all agree that they are a big country. They have a lot of population, a lot of area, and all that. But they should not come under the euphoria of their greatness, and they keep on mentioning some Mahabharata and all that. They need to understand, come on ground, understand the realities on ground. It is not only China and Pakistan, and with Chinese and Pakistani, these two very potent fronts, their own generals and everybody is saying that they can't cope up with these things in a manner with the type of forces which they have. Although they have large forces, but they are not very modern forces. And we have seen it, their skirmishes against China, and also whatever the Pakistan Air Force did with them. Elsewhere also, whatever has been happening to them. So I think Moe Jafri was right that there are other, like the farmers, they have again come up. You must have heard these days. So they have their hands full. The northeastern provinces, whatever is happening there. So I think it is in India's own interest that they realize that for 1.5 billion people of this region, we should not, put them in such difficult situation. The only thing they have to do is that they have to abide by the international standards, their laws. They have to abide by whatever United Nations Security Council resolutions, and that is all that we ask. Nothing more, nothing less. And two things also which are part of history. One, you cannot keep people suppressed forever against their will. It cannot be done for a very long time. And secondly, once people they rise for their independence, again one day they will get their independence. So why to tread such a difficult path and learn history again and again through such difficult periods? What we are suggesting is, and you also mentioned what happened in the Islamabad dialogue. I think Pakistan Prime Minister and even Chief of Army Staff, they were very candid, and I would say that they had gone many steps out to extend their hands of friendship, provided India adheres to some basic norms of United Nations resolutions and peace, if they really want peace in this region. So they are the larger country. It is on them. It is for them to decide whether they want to keep on floundering the resources of this area just by fighting, or we want some good economic revival in this, especially once one problem has been resolved, and now the Central Asian countries can trade a lot with India through Afghanistan, through Pakistan. We have even asked India to join CPEC. China was even one time ready to change the name of CPEC for the sake of Indians, that if they want to join it. So now that CPEC is going to take off, again, they have a great opportunity to join it. But for that, they have to stop the atrocities on, Kashmiris. We are not saying that tomorrow we must resolve that issue. First, stop these atrocities, and whatever changes you have made, undo them, and then we can start talking, start negotiating, and this entire zone, this area can get economic bonanza. I am sure that many sane Indians must be thinking on these lines, and we've heard such voices also. So let us see for how long they will keep on following this adversarial relationship with all their neighbors, and especially China and Pakistan. I don't think then the entire this region has no future if they keep sticking to the transigent attitude. So let us see whether they learn any lessons after whatever recently has happened in this area, and we hope that they will. They should.
Indeed, and for all intents and purposes, I mean, the peoples of India and Pakistan, both, if you speak perhaps to the ordinary person on the street, I mean, they would like to see peace. I mean, it's just at the government level. I'm talking of a point quickly, which generally point out. They have this thing called an international rules-based order, the United Nations per se. They want the Taliban to abide by this international rules-based order. Yet you've got the likes of India who are carrying out human rights violations, atrocities which cannot perhaps even be described on television. And it's interesting to see how the Indians seem to flout this international rules-based order. Right, time now for us to take a short break on the quest. Coming up on the other side, we'll be examining some of the flurry of diplomats in and out of Islamabad following the Afghan Taliban takeover. And we'll be giving you some wee updates from Afghanistan, the very latest as well. Do stay with us here on The Quest. Welcome back. You're watching The Quest. Just some quick updates from Afghanistan. Of course, it's almost been a week now since the US withdrawal took place and the Afghan Taliban rolled into Kabul. There has been some confusion and speculation as to why they have not been able to put together a formal government or announce a government as such. And one of the reasons which was floated was perhaps the unrest which was taking place in Panjshir Valley, in fact. Now there we have a national resistance front which was being headed by Ahmad Massoud, his father, who has been called the Lion of Panjshir, spearheaded the resistance against the Russians. Now, for the past week or so, there have been unconfirmed reports as to what has actually been happening around the valley. This valley has 20 other sub-valleys. It's approximately about an hour from Kabul. So there were reports that the Afghan Taliban had surrounded this whole valley and that there were some negotiations going on between Ahmad Massoud and the Afghan Taliban leadership regarding putting arms down and for them, obviously, to be part of some inclusive formation of a government. Now, recent reports were suggesting that Panjshir now has been taken and taken in the sense that they have laid down their arms and the resistance is all but over now. Recently, there has been a press conference by the Afghan Taliban confirming this. Prior to that, Ahmad Massoud, who was leading the resistance, had said that he would not surrender, and it was not in his vocabulary. Very quickly, let's cross over to Isa Naqvi. Isa, it was perhaps just a question of time, really, without any sort of international support, without any international aid getting in, and of course with the Taliban restricting supply lines to the valley, that this form of negotiation was better off for everybody at large, and that it now the Afghan Taliban can show a united front. What do you have on the latest that you've been hearing?
Well, there are reports which are confirming now that Taliban have taken control of Panjshir and its adjoining districts. It was very important for them because there have been calls from the international community and also from Pakistan to form an inclusive government in Afghanistan. Now, we had a scenario since 15th of August that all the resistance leaders, they had gathered in the valley of Panjshir in hope to seek some military assistance from the outside world. There have been calls made to India, to the US, and to their other allies to supply them with weapons, with medicines, and with food supplies. And there have been some unconfirmed reports of some supplies being airdropped from Tajikistan into the valley. But this was very important. Taking control of Panjshir was very important for them because you cannot form an inclusive government when there is an active resistance going on, and all the Tajik people from the Tajik ethnic background, the Uzbeks and the Hazaras, if these factions form up to 30 to 35% of the Afghan population, a country with 39 million people. So if 30 or 35% of them are left out, so you cannot call that government an inclusive government, which would face the issues of legitimacy. Obviously, the countries like Pakistan, who are bound by their geography to take a different approach than the other countries in the world can take. But it also comes to dealing with other neighbors, the regional powers, and a government which is not inclusive would not be able to draw or muster up that support in the region or internationally. So it was very important. I think this move is a step towards stability in Afghanistan. Now, what matters and what is important is that all these leaders and all these Afghan warring factions sit on a table and decide. And as soon as a government is announced from Kabul, the what structure there is going to be, which is going to rule Afghanistan, the sooner the better, because there have been reports from various international organizations fearing a humanitarian crisis developing in Afghanistan and the exodus that is being feared. And already there are reports that there is a pressure on the borders, Afghanistan's borders with its neighboring countries, and lots of people have flocked there and they want to move out of Afghanistan.
Moya Jafri, how much of this do you think was fatigue, much like how we saw the Afghan forces, what was described as capitulation in front of the Afghan Taliban, more so a lack of motivation, and after all, I mean, you're Afghan fighting Afghan. So do you think that this is, of course, one hopes that this would be, the end of this resistance, and of course the inclusiveness that Isa talks about is shown. But how do you see the overall morale now of the Afghan people? Of course, 20 years of a blistering war, hit by daisy cutters and every single artillery that was available to the most powerful military on earth. Fatigue, perhaps?
Yep, definitely. And it's a tough thing to comment. It's a tough situation to comment on, because when we talk about this being a good omen for the Afghan people, that the war would finally be over, there are many who see such comments as a tacit approval or support for a Taliban government and nothing else. So it's very important to understand two things in this regard. That is, number one, that there needs to be peace in Afghanistan. There needs to be relative calm in Afghanistan for any form of government, which is inclusive or otherwise, for that matter. Although we're all rooting for an inclusive government, because that's the only thing that would stick. But in case there isn't peace, and there is some level of conflict going on at any point, at any instance, in any part of Afghanistan, there will always be this looming threat of another anarchy sort of situation, where descendants, where people who would not be happy with the way Afghanistan could progress in the future without war, those factions could use that situation and fuel that and fan the flames of those that dissent, and create instability in Afghanistan and in the region as well. So fatigue, true. The people would definitely want the decades-long war to end. But on a side note, what I personally believe is, considering the history of Panjshir and the way the people of Panjshir Valley have resisted and fought back, Taliban might need to, put in a lot of effort to keep things the way they are today in Panjshir, where they claim control of the valley and the province. Because we understand how Amrullah Saleh is connected, how he has a massive following within power corridors in India. And now, as Isa pointed out, there were unconfirmed reports of military support being airdropped by Tajikistan. So all these factors, for the time being, I believe they should go ahead. Like you pointed out, that it was one of the factors holding up the formation of government. But I believe that this might not go away that easily for the Taliban. It will take a little bit of time. I believe there will be a little bit of unrest in the days to follow as well, where all these factors are going to most probably combine together. And there might be, we can't really say about the magnitude of the retaliation, but there might be some. So in the best interest of the people of Afghanistan, yes, the war must end. And the government, like in his statement today, as Abdullah Mujahid pointed out in his press conference, that they are not looking to discriminate against the people of Panjshir or punish them for their resistance. and that they will accept them wholeheartedly, and they'll try to incorporate them in the government in the government forming process as well. So let's see. We've got we just started the week. It's a big week, as we all know. The Taliban have promised announcing a government in this week. So let's figure out. We'll figure out what is the ultimate end to this once they announce the government, and we see how local factions in Afghanistan accept that.
And just on a side note, of course, I just want to swing this back round to India because it's quite significant that, of course, India, for its own intents and purposes, has had a very big stake in Afghanistan, obviously has been in the bonnet about being excluded from all of the initial parleys, one would say. But there have been some negotiations taking place in Qatar, the political office of course, the Afghan Taliban based out in Qatar. And there has been a meeting of sorts. This has been projected by the Indian side. The Indians said that the Afghan Taliban wanted talks. I mean, how much of a spoiler, General Lodi, do you think that India still can become in this particular scenario, given the fact that it's now almost forced to recognize the Taliban? The Taliban have reciprocated in a way by saying that they would like to keep some relations open with India. And of course, India, with almost $3 billion plus investment, cannot be happy about the way things have transpired. So do you believe that India is all but over in Afghanistan, or do you think there's still more to come from the other side?
I think after all that has happened, not only India, if there are any other detractors also, which is possible, they would like to change their posture. I mean, they have their interest in Afghanistan, and they would not like to leave this field open for others. So they would change tactics, or rather strategy, and would come back in the political way, in the economic way. I'm also thinking that after some time you will also find America and the West also coming, and again, Pakistan will become very important, and they will be coming to Pakistan, and then going to Afghanistan and all that, making some economic base over here, not that military sense, but they will still ask us to help them. You must have heard that many people are approaching Pakistan that Pakistan should allow a refugees camp, which will be held by. There are no refugees, and they want a refugee camp over here. So naturally, they're looking for a certain kind of base other than the military base. Pakistan has done well so far. We have not accepted, any further refugee camps. But I think India will keep trying, and we should have no qualms about it, because Afghanistan is an independent country, a different country. If they want Indians come there and participate in economic activities or construction activities, but our only concern is that the same way the base, the space is not given to India so that they can train and they can plan operations against Pakistan. I am quite sure that will not happen because Taliban has promised this not only with Pakistan. They have promised the same thing with China, with Russia, with Iran, with other countries, the world at large, that they will not allow their country to be used for any such activities. So I think even that happens, we should be all right with it. But Afghan Taliban must have seen what all Indians have been doing, even after their takeover, even after it was very obvious that they will be taking over. When the Indian embassy people were being evacuated, you must have heard that some of the aircrafts are coming with arms for Ashraf Ghani. And now, whatever we have heard about, Panjsher, that they have been helping the Panjsheris to, keep the resistance on and all those things. These memories will not go away very easily. So I think India has lost its space in Afghanistan. They will have to work very hard to come back, and it is going to take a long time to do so. But because it all depends what other partners, because India is a very strategic partner with the United States. So what is the United States thinking? They have two options. One is that to carry on with the same antagonist attitude and fail again and again, or to again change posture and give a helping hand, release those $90 billion dollars which belong to Afghans, and also do not stop IMF and World Bank from helping them. So these things will be very clear very soon. But one ominous thing has happened. I think Tony Blair was talking today on BBC. I have not heard him myself, but others who heard him, they said that he was talking about the revival of Islam in Iran, in Afghanistan, and now they were thinking that it can also happen in Pakistan. So if that is the attitude, instead of thinking and rather taking an adversarial, stance altogether, then the entire region can, go into chaos, and there we can face a lot of trouble. We should have our fingers crossed. Let us see what happens. I think a lot depends on the attitude of the Taliban so far. It seems very nice. It seems very good. Nobody has got any chance to blame them for anything. So if they continue along this trajectory, peace is the future of this country, and peace is the future of this region.
Very much. Just to quickly add on there, Tony Blair, you mentioned, of course, who was hand in glove with President Bush when the Operation Enduring Freedom was. It'd be interesting to see if Tony Blair would make a visit and perhaps come and show his face in this part of the woods as well. Now, quickly, we've got we're running short on time, in fact. So just want to quickly come to this flurry of diplomats who've been in and out of Pakistan. Of course, on the one hand, India, if you pick up any of the national dailies, they're screaming at the rafters, from the rafters rather, about foul play, Pakistan's foul play, Pakistan has assisted, Pakistan has done this, Pakistan has done that. But on the flip side, the international community can't do anything without Pakistan, it seems. Now, there's been a flurry of diplomats in and out of Pakistan. Only on Sunday, we have seen there was a special envoy meeting for the neighbours of Afghanistan, which was chaired by Pakistan's special envoy to Afghanistan as well. Isa, coming to you very quickly, because I would like to keep you this answer is quite brief now. You obviously keep a keen eye on what's going on in the Foreign Office. What have you been hearing out of the Foreign Office? Of course, refugees and the assistance which foreign countries need in getting their own personnel out of Afghanistan. They want Pakistan. They're talking about this air corridor of aid between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So what is it that they want? Is it just the refugees that they want Pakistan to look after? What do they really want? This is what most people are curious to know.
Well, it's my understanding that even the Western countries, the countries whose foreign ministers are flying into Islamabad and holding meetings with the officials here, even they are not very clear about what policy they are going to have for Afghanistan. It's a fluid situation. It's a volatile situation. It's changing with each passing day. And the country, which I think the way it has evolved, somehow there is a misconception that has developed that Pakistan perhaps is in charge of what the things are, the way the things are unfolding in Afghanistan, which I don't think is correct, because Pakistan does hold some influence on some of the groups in Afghanistan and perhaps Taliban as well, but that is not to the extent where Pakistan can actually dictate how the things would unfold in Afghanistan. But still, the world which has flown out of Afghanistan, they do not have any means or ways to deal with what's happening in that country. Secondly, they need a face saving. That image of a superpower, that has shattered. The way they had decided that things would unfold. If you remember, when Joe Biden visited the State Department on 4th of February, for the first time after assuming office, there he announced that he wants to leave the war that was fought for the last 20 years. He wants to focus on the war for next 20 years. Then on 14th of April, he said that China is the most serious competitor. So it seems that America and its allies, they have flown out of Afghanistan with the single aim to compete China, for which they are pampering India as their bulwark against China. We know that simultaneously there are talks of formation of an Asian NATO. India is part of the quadrilateral security dialogue. So now we have a situation where, to my understanding, the countries that have flown out of Afghanistan, if their aim is to counter China, they would not want stability in the backyard of China. Now, technically, Afghanistan is the backyard of China, Russia, and perhaps the regional powers or the possible regional allies of these two countries. So now they do not have any means to deal with the government, because flying into Afghanistan and talking to Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, for that matter, would be seen as if the world has recognized them as the legitimate power in Afghanistan. So whatever they are doing is to whatever their concerns have or are in Afghanistan, they want to address them through Pakistan. So that's why we see lots of foreign ministers flying into Pakistan, lots of presidents and prime ministers around the world calling Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to leave it there. Gentlemen, Ihsan Akvi, Hoya Jafri, thank you for your participation, and General Naeem Khalid Lodi, thank you for your participation as well. That draws this programme to a close. Don't forget, we're on at the same time, same place every day, 7 until 8. Till then, I'll see you soon. Thank you.